I'm Ron Baker, Director of the Canadian Small Church Ministry Centers, sponsored by Small Church Connections. And this is us, Canadian Small Churches in Actions podcast. Now today, you'll see that we have a number of people with us as our guests, and we're taking a look at a recent study called Parenting Faith. And it's going to talk a little bit about that, but these are just some representatives. The study is new. And so the representatives that are here today that helped and partnered with this, in one sense, this is new. They've worked through it as it's been going on, but nevertheless, the final study is completed. And so I'm going to be asking them just some questions about the parenting and how you parent faith. So we're just going to swing right into this. We'll let you see who they are. I'm going to start off with a very simple question for each of them. And that simple question is, who are you and what's been your ministry journey? How have you ended up where you've ended up, and where have you ended up? And then we'll go from there and talk a little bit about parenting and parenting faith. So I'm looking around the circle and thinking, you know what, we're going to start with Cheryl, then we're going to go to Eric, and then we'll end up with Tanya. And we'll go from there and see what happens. So the question is, who are you? And what has been your ministry journey along the way?
Yes, thank you so much, Ron. My name is Cheryl Walsh, and I'm the Executive Director of Converge Canada. Converge Canada is a ministry of Bible League Canada, and we launched Converge in September of 2020, and I've been in that role since that time. My ministry journey, however, I have been working in the not-for-profit Christian-based ministry area for 15 years and have been with Bible League Canada for coming up to 9 years this fall, actually.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know. So I have a real passion for not-for-profit and helping to grow God's kingdom here in Canada.
Okay, let's go to our next person. Hi, Eric.
Hello, Ron. My name is Eric Provost. I serve with Awana International Canada, and I've been with the ministry for just about 11 years now, which is pretty exciting. And basically, Awana, we come alongside churches to provide great resources, support, curriculum, so that they can see their vision for their children, youth, family ministries realized. Ultimately, our goal is that kids would belong to a loving Christian community, believe God's word, and become lifelong followers of Jesus. That's what we're praying for.
Well, as I had mentioned to you once before, the whole Awana thing has been part of my life and my journey since 1977, when I started a group in Kindersley, Saskatchewan. So I've appreciated very much the work that Awana has done. Well, Tanya's got a whole other area of ministry journey. And who are you, by the way?
Well, first of all, I am Tanya.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tanya. Yeah,
that's all right. And I serve as the Children and Family Ministries Associate for the Canadian Baptists of Ontario and Quebec. And that is, it's a denominational role for our family of churches, which extend throughout Ontario. And then we have some churches in Quebec. The English-speaking churches in Quebec are kind of under our association. And my role is specifically to help our churches in their children and family ministries. So anything to do within whether it's supporting their ministry leaders, their programs, whether they're looking for strategy, training, teaching. That's a lot of what I do as I support our churches. I'm also an ordained pastor with Canadian Baptists. And before I came into this role, which I've been in for just about 11 years also, I was a pastor in local churches in downtown Toronto, serving in next generation ministries. So youth, young adult, and children and family ministries.
Wow. So, but you're all basically from Ontario, aren't you? I'm watching the various nods, which not all of us will necessarily see, but this is going to be great. Okay, before I get distracted, and you may know or may not know, I love rabbit trails. And one of my rabbit trails is that Grimsby, Ontario, which happens to house the headquarters of, is it Converge?
Yes. Sorry?
Yeah, that's your headquarters area. Yeah, Grimsby, Ontario is where my mother came from. A little town
Oh,
actually called
lovely.
Smithville, just outside Grimsby. But
Oh,
oh,
yes.
there,
Yes.
which is part of some of what I want to explore today too. Is this whole matter of parenting faith comes down to often small groups. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, let's just start. Why don't we, Cheryl, why don't you just talk a little bit about what did you find exciting about some of this research, and
Sure.
what's challenging out of the research that was done?
Yeah, sure. I did find what to be most exciting for me and the role that we have here across Canada is that ultimately 99% of parents really do want to transmit their faith to their children through modeling and teaching combined. And so I'm sure for all of us, that is an exciting aspect of the outcome of this research study, is that there is a strong desire of parents to do that. What I found also challenging simultaneously is that 73% of parents, however, while they want to transmit their faith through modeling and teaching, they also want to give their children religious choice. And so that was quite a significant topic that we did discuss throughout our time spent together for those of us who partnered with this study. That was very surprising to us. And I think for a lot of the partners, the most challenging aspect of the results for sure.
So with religious choice, how was that challenging?
Yeah, well, the participants in the study would self-identify them as devout Christians or devout evangelical Christians. So these would be parents that would be going to church and taking their families to church more than 2 times per month. And so if we are looking at a devout group of parents, that then for those parents to then 73% of them to then say they still want to give their children a religious choice seemed and felt a little contradictory to us. So how is it that you plan to model and you want to model and teach your children faith formation while also providing religious choice at the same time? So how are parents going to go about doing that? What is our role as denominations and organizations in supporting that as they come to us for conversations, as they look to us for resources? And so how are we going to then respond to that? And so I think those are the challenges that certainly I'm processing through as as a partner who represents an organization. And so, yeah, I'm sure that the others might feel the same way with that challenge, but it just felt a little bit, just contradictory. And so, where do we go from here? Becomes those next questions.
Yeah, and I want to get into that question a little bit later. But first, let's go back. Let's go to Tanya and just see what you would say about that. What was exciting? What was most challenging for you as you look through it, Tanya?
Well, in some ways, what was most exciting is that I think that I have Canadian data that affirms what I've been observing and hearing in our churches and from our ministry leaders. So it's not necessarily something specific in the study, but just this affirmation nationally that what we're seeing and facing as challenges is really what parents are saying in their responses. So that, for me, that was exciting because I think that gives some credibility to what we're doing in our organization in terms of how we're trying to resource our churches and the conversations we're having. So that part was exciting for me to see that we're not off the mark in what we're doing and what we're providing and what we're trying to inspire and challenge our ministry leaders with. I would have to agree with Cheryl on the challenging part. It was really surprising to me to see how high the number was in terms of parents that want to give this religious freedom and choice. I think I see that, I recognize that, but it does create challenges in terms of how do we kind of broach those conversations with pastors, in terms of what their role is to minister and lead parents when parents are really wanting on the one hand, it seems like this opposite. They want to give them this life of faith, but then they also want them to have the freedom to experience and choose from, a whole buffet of options. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm definitely going to come back to this question, but Eric, I'll let you head into that. What was most exciting and most challenging for you as you look through this study?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to echo what's been said. The 99% is very encouraging that we want to pass on faith,
Mm-hmm.
but really, let's jump into what Tanya said, because I think it's the most relevant.
Okay,
That
yeah, let's
the
do
challenge, it really is where the tension is why is this there's this seeking position that we want to allow our kids to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it comes out of a good position of we want them to have a true experience in faith and really be drawn into the faith and drawn to Jesus as they have an experience. But if they're, my question coming out of this and where I'm really considering and praying and trying to be open to is, what does that say about the experience of the parents or us as adults? What's our experience being? If we have had this really deep and true experience with the Spirit and with God leading us and changing us, then that should be more poured out, or just it has to be something that is experienced and passed on to the kids. So there's concern for our kids, 100%, our young adults. There's concern for parents as well, and adults who, I think, in many aspects of the feedback of this report, where kids are searching and have openness to a lot of different things and are experiencing voices from around the world. Well, I think it's a reflection of the fact that parents are searching and getting feedback from all these places and voices around the world as well. So it's a big tension, big challenge.
Yeah. I by the way, the rest of you, feel free to jump in now as we continue on.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just throw another part of the study that I found interesting, is that most of the parents said they didn't want to parent faith like their parents parented faith.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Okay, I have an idea of what that means, but what have you found?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well, I'll just jump in and say one thing.
You start off.
I think it's one of the things that we don't want our kids to have the same experience that we had. I know, myself growing up in faith, there was a long list of check boxes mm-hmm. that had to be met. There was rights and wrongs. There was, a ladder of how you're growing in faith, and almost a hierarchy. And I don't think that that's the experience we want for our kids. We do want a true, authentic experience with Jesus. And so somewhere in there, parents are trying to figure out the tension. How do I keep, some good value and moral expectations, biblical expectations, but how do I have a very transformational and authentic Spirit-led experience that draws them as well? That's an interesting
Cheryl
tension.
Nodding away here, and I want to hear what she has to say there.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I really liked the language that the study uses when talking about sort of what Eric was just sharing about, this background that parents have of being required to have unquestionable obedience mm-hmm. and a lack of explanation in matters of faith.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Eric was speaking to, is that for parents who grew up in that culture, in that type of home, they then are sort of swinging this pendulum to say, then we're just going to do like the complete opposite and give our children lots of choice. Now, I grew up in a family with no faith and this option of choice. However, then nothing was transmitted to me. Mm-hmm. So simultaneously, I didn't receive any teaching, any information about faith or religions. And so that's why I think these, follow-up questions is what is coming at us, as Eric just said. Like, how do we find sort of that middle ground with parents who grew up with this culture of having basically like unquestioning obedience? Like, there's no room for questions. And now we live in a culture where there's lots of room for questions about everything. So this is where we're sort of finding this tension, this little, like this dance, I think, with parents. But yeah, I don't know if Tanya, you have any insights from a denominational perspective, because I'd love to hear more of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think I mean, I'm not sure how many parents today also would still necessarily be in the same church that they might have grown up in, the same background. But I would say that I think that sense of questioning, I think a lot of parents experienced faith life where they followed. They just knew the answers. That's what they had to do. And there wasn't room for them to kind of wrestle through these faith questions. And so wanting to allow their children to have a faith experience where they can question is a really strong priority, I think, that we see come out in the study. And I wonder, I mean, this might be jumping ahead too, but I wonder if that's also why parents aren't necessarily looking to the church to find their answers, because
Yeah.
there's still something in that structure that doesn't allow for those questions to be asked.
Well, you're asking a huge, you're touching on a huge thing that I hear. I mean, I've been part of one denomination my whole life. Nevertheless, in my retirement, I'm preaching in everything from United Churches to Lutheran churches to evangelical free churches to the broad spectrum. And I'm finding it that, okay, I'm going to back up and just ask a more general question. Why do we need the church? Anyone want to take that one?
Oh boy.
Well, I mean, the study does tell us that just 49%, right, of the parents asked value their church for its community.
Right.
Right. So yeah, that is a telling question, right? So why do they need the church and what are they looking for? But we do know, even though we do have that result from the study, that there are parents that are looking to the church for programming for their kids. So that then became very clear to us as outcomes of the study. And so that there is a desire for their kids to be connected to a church for kids programming or youth or after school programming that might be run from the church, but through a parachurch organization. And so I would say like that is where parents are looking and what they're looking for from the church.
Yeah. I think it came out in the study too, that social connection. Parents are looking for that place for relationships for their kids. But I think I want to make sure I say clearly, I believe in the church, and
I do too.
I think
I
we
want to say
need the
that too.
church. Yeah, and I think that is a tension to wrestle with, but a challenge for ministry leaders to say, okay, like parents maybe aren't necessarily seeing the value of the church in the same ways that we as pastors do. So how do we help to meet that need, that felt need for connection, for programs, for that, but then also really communicate what it is that is in the power of the church and in God's design for us to be in community as church.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric, I got to let you take a little stab at this here too.
Oh, just a little stab.
Yeah.
I know we've got lots of nodding heads on the screen here. We need the church, right? Good question about, do we need the church? I think in my mind, and what I've been considering after this report is maybe a little addition to the question is, do we need maybe a different experience with the church, right? So this is a great opportunity to take some Canadian research, Canadian content, and take time to really consider and talk, do what we're doing here. We had a great discussion group with all the people who were involved, and it's going to continue to grow those discussion groups. But take time to consider and pray and consider and pray and discern and pray and really look in the mirror, I think, as people, individuals, but the church as well, going, what is the experience? Okay, we've got some good insight here from the report. And how can we better model Jesus and better serve out in our communities to reach, like Tanya said, those felt needs that I think it's a great question. If we take the time,
Mhm.
lean on Jesus, because that's a big question.
Yeah. Well, I say that question in
Yeah.
part because I've been working with and teaching at Eston College, which is a Bible college, basically training students for Christian ministry. In the early part of the year, I started a group and got together a group that we called the FISH group, Faith in Canadian Societies, History, and all that. So we came up with a marvelous name. The interesting thing is that we were asking the question, what is the church going to look like? Because these are all students that want to go into ministry in the church. And I don't think, I think I would be fair in saying not one of them wanted the church to be what they grew up in, which sounds weird. But what does that mean for us in the future? What does that mean for Converge Canada? What does that mean for Awana? What does that mean for a denomination of Baptists? Okay, I'm going to just throw that out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump in first if that's okay here. I think for us, it really does mean, so this report has been confirming on some things that we've been working on as a ministry. We've got to, everyone here has got to, working in ministries, they've got a great legacy in ministry, but the living on is where we need to have a lot of consideration. And so taking time not to jump to a position. I read the report and this is what my position is and I'm moving this way. But this is a great opportunity for us to engage. We've got a lot of people across Canada that we can talk to and walk through this and get feedback on, be open, and most of all, kind of be open to what God has for us and change. That's where we're kind of setting in right now. How do we take time to consider and discern and pray, get some guidance from the other people in the group, from Lindsay and Rick, and really hear from our partners across Canada as well.
And I would agree with that, Eric. I think for us also, the conversations we're having is how do we start facilitating these conversations with our pastors, with our ministry leaders as we work through this data and consider what the report's telling us, what we're observing, what we think, where are we being challenged as pastors and as ministry leaders, really wrestling through assumptions that have been held that maybe the data is showing aren't correct. So a lot of time to just really discern and pray, I think, is the approach we're taking over the next several months as we work through this report.
Well, Cheryl, we can't let you by without hearing from you, so go for it.
Sorry, my internet just cut out there. So
there you go.
Were you looking for me to jump in?
Sure, jump in. Take it away.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think for Converge, we're thinking of it sort of in two different categories. For us as a national parachurch organization, our role is looking to support denominations and organizations like what we have here with Awana, is to help support those organizations who are training leaders and offering discipleship programs. And I think we're going to be looking to them and for them who are going to have a strong emphasis on modeling and teaching of the faith combined together, which is a huge outcome of the study that we learned is the best way to transmit faith.
I'm going to guess we almost.
How can we be taking the results of this study and having different conversations for the future? How can we be encouraging denominations who are looking to start and plant new churches and actually involving children's ministry leaders in those conversations and in those dialogues, right? The kids are the future of those churches and they want it to look different. And so how can we be, supporting conversations and supporting dialogue where we can be talking about it differently moving forward? That's one area that I'm really looking forward to is, helping those groups to bridge those gaps, because we've seen also in seminaries it's very siloed, right? Senior pastor, children's pastor, youth pastor.
Yeah.
But how much cross teaching, how much cross learning is there in all of that? And so as we consider the future of the church, those would be the things that we're most excited for.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I see is that we have to look at a different, I don't know if structure is the right word. Maybe the ship that we're all on has to be revised and revamped or whatever, but something has to be done. And I think the study made that fairly obvious. We're running out of time, unfortunately. Time's up almost. So one last question for all of you. If you had one piece of advice for small church pastors, and we particularly deal with small church pastors, what would that piece of advice be? And Cheryl, start us off again, and we'll go back and just hear from each other.
Sure. I would say involve your kids. Involve the children of your families in as many aspects of your church expression as you can. That's what I would say.
That's a very quick answer. Can you fill us out a little bit more? I like your answer.
Yeah, I think this when we were all together as partners a couple months ago, we were talking about this. Because how is it that we're going to teach the parents how to transmit their faith if we aren't teaching the parents how to transmit their faith in the everyday expressions of our church communities? So by including kids in, worship expressions, in service expressions with your church, serving on a Sunday, or even just serving outside in the communities, teaching them through baptism and communion. And so if we can be including the children and families in those everyday components of our church culture, that I think is how the church is going to teach the parents to model and transmit the faith. And then that's how parents are going to end up doing it with their kids. Just that natural domino, like that multiplication factor.
Great. Eric, take it away.
Oh, take it away. Let me just add on.
Don't go too far away, but
because I'll just add on, because I love that, and I completely agree with Cheryl. Teaching is very important. We cannot stray from good biblical teaching. But a long time ago, I realized that little eyes are watching all the time. And the most impactful things are, especially for kids, but even for adults, I think myself as well, teaching is important, but it's seeing how people interact, seeing how people behave, seeing people or adults or kids model Jesus, and the little micro decisions that they make and attitudes, those are so impactful. So I think what Cheryl's saying is right. If we come together as small churches and the focus is relationship and closeness and community, I think that this is what the report's saying. We want to be able to question. We don't want to be judged because we got something wrong. We want to be cared for. And I think these are all things that Jesus modeled to us, and it was all based on relationship. So I love what Cheryl says. I'll just add the word relationship. And then Tanya, I'll pass the torch.
Pass it, and I'll build on this same theme, because I agree with what has been said, and I will take it even to a very simple thing of starting place. Learn the name of every child and youth in your congregation and call them by name each time you see them. Learn little facts about them. I think that's seems like a simple, funny thing, but it goes a long way in the life of our kids and our youth to know that they're known by their name. So that's what I would say to the small church pastor.
This has been fantastic. Thank you all very, very much. I wish we could go on for another hour or two, and maybe sometime we'll do that. But for the moment, just thank you, and look forward to seeing what comes in the next little while as we seek to be parenting faith in our children.
Amazing.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks.